This weigh-in is brought to you by our stable of sponsors. Hello and a very warm welcome to Weigh In. Plenty to review on this week's show. We had a key 2-year-old race coming in from Te Rapa, stakes action from Riccarton, and of course jumps racing was back in action as well. What a wonderful thrill it was to see that. Welcome in my co-host Michael Guerin. And Michael, got Dean McKenzie joining us for the last part of the show, and as always, it's jam-packed.
It is, Emma. Big hi to you, big hi to everybody on a Monday night watching around New Zealand or further afield if you're watching this later in the week. Chief Transition Officer for TAB New Zealand, so basically the boss of the tab, Dean McKenzie is here with us. We're trying to ask Emily some questions that people at home may not get the chance to ask themselves about what's a very fluid space at the moment. The whole international gambling space is very fluid. Some good news to come from Dean about payouts for this season we're in now because of increased turnover. As you're watching this, if it is a Monday night, right now counties and Auckland are having the second of 2 forums, Emily. Really important stuff about the amalgamation of those 2 great clubs and then hopefully working in unison with Avondale. That is happening on Monday night. The indications are very good, and there was indications today at the Ellerslie Forum that we would expect to see the famed Ellerslie Hill more than likely sold. We can't get into that tonight because some of that's embargoed till tomorrow morning. What we will do is promise the viewers at home we'll discuss that in depth in the future. And away from the good racing, Emily, some updates on some of the jockeys who didn't have quite such a good weekend.
No, plenty of drama with regards to jockeys, but let's kick things off with our racing review, and we start with the featured 2-year-old race from Te Rapa on Saturday, where Turn the Ace and Rangitoa had a good tussle up the straight.
Back in behind these Abeyance as they turn and head in. Further out then Chancellor and Divine Sava right down the outside. 300 metres to go. Turn the Ace, the leader from Rangitoa on the inside, giving plenty kicks again. 2 lengths away, Beldara looks to warm up. Rangitoa, Turn the Ace, and also there as well as Beldara at the 150. Rangitoa, Turn the Ace is a half length away. And third spot is Beldara, Turn the Ace in at the line. Oh, gee, it's close, right on the line, I think. No, I'm going to sit on the fence. Obliged to sit on the fence. Rangitoa or Turn the Ace, you know which one I reckon would like to see it win, but I don't know if he has. It's close, very close.
I said it on the day and say it again. I don't think either of these horses lost any admirers. A really gutsy battle and a fantastic training effort by the Baker Forsman team. This horse made its debut last week, a week between runs, and now a listed winner. Wonderful for the sire as well. That's
pretty rare, isn't it, Emily? Like these days, juveniles don't often back up week in, week out, but not from unheard of maiden into stakes victory. Spoke to Andrew Forsman, who chose this horse and then syndicated it with the family. Horse is going to go on the Guineas Trail now, so he'll go into the paddock and be given his chance to be a Guineas horse. I think for a lot of people, when you heard George talk about it in the commentary there, I think this horse is almost more about Turn Me Loose than it is about itself. I almost feel sorry for the horse because everybody's like, wow, this is really cool. And it's a big deal for Windsor Park because they've now got a stakes winning stallion standing at the place at a time when people are setting fees and people are buying horses and talking about where their mares are going to go. So, look, they've been great supporters of the New Zealand industry and domestic stallions, so I'm thrilled for them. They actually had a pretty cool initiative themselves on Friday.
Rugby, racing and beer, was it? I liked it,
I think it sums up Rodney Schick pretty well, actually. They took horses down to Christchurch and sold them in a function format. And I think that was really innovative from them too. So they've had a really strong last week with Mongolian Khan having a couple of winners along the way too. And I think a lot of people in the industry feel really good about that. So that's the substructure story to this horse, who's obviously pretty good because he's won 2 out of 2.
Well, some drama in the race. We can have a little look at this footage of Novair, which is quite remarkable. You see it just in the corner, and we'll go to the head-on shot from here. And it gets pretty much airborne, Michael. Poor Andrew Calder just about lost his head coming out of the barriers there. I think he touched the roof, but just a really unfortunate incident. And goodness me, Novair will no doubt go to the paddock and will come back as a very talented 3-year-old.
And go for a trial too. So the steward said you have to trial once you misbehave quite that badly. It's such a rare thing, ironically, for Tiaka juveniles. They're so well mannered because they're so professional at home. And then we saw something similar from Amaralinia in the Oaks. 2 totally different horses, obviously not related, but it's funny, when it happened to a normal juvenile, you'd be like, oh, well, that happens to everybody. But when it happened to a horse in the tangerine colours, people are like, oh, didn't expect to see that.
Just drums at home that they are not machines, they have their own minds. It was an up and down day for the Baker Fallsman team. They took out the other feature on the programme with Crafty Jess, but there was a fall in the race in their other runner, Moroni.
It as well. That would have been, I think it was Cutting Up Rough. So down to the 150 metres, it's Crafty Jess the leader. Germanicus is running on. Over on the inside, Ranger's still there as well. It's Crafty Jess, Ranger and Germanicus. They go to the post. Oh, gee, that's a very good finish here. Either Ranger or Crafty Jess, and with them also Germanicus in a three-way go.
Well, obviously, most importantly, concentrate on the winner and Crafty Jess. She just loves Te Rapa. She's got a fantastic record at the track, course and distance stats. She just seems to find another leg when she gets to Te Rapa. And I thought really kudos to Tegan Newman, who rode a double on the day, and she's achieving some goals that she set herself, and great to see.
And the first ever ride she's had for Murray Baker and Andrew Ford.
And the Corniches, who she rode her other winner for, so yeah.
We had her on the show a couple of months ago, and I was really impressed by Tegan's drive and how much she wants to get better at a job. And I said to Andrew Forsman, because I rang him about the two-year-old one, I said, what did you make of that? He said, oh, smart young lady, really good to deal with. We were really happy to get her on the horse, and obviously she's done the job for them. But the horse, she needs black type. That's the job she needs. Andrew said, I went back and looked for reform because I thought she had a black type placing, but she hasn't. And that's probably indicative of the standard she is. She's on the verge of black type. Obviously, she'll be worth a lot more if they can get that.
And you'd think she'd pick one up with a race at Te Rapa. I'd be thinking based on her record.
Well, particularly with a bit of sting out of the track. She can handle that, and hopefully, there's not that many black type-ish mares races around, but there's a few races for handicap type horses. So she's a pretty brave horse. You'd be stoked to own a horse like her. Obviously, the race, as you mentioned, was a very upside-down affair for that stable, because what happened, and we're not going to show you because it's not nice to see, is Moroni came across Heels for Masahiro Shubi, and he contacted Heels. Now, Masa came off and he had to go to hospital. So the horse, Moroni, was okay. We'll get to it in order. Masa went to hospital and came out on Sunday, and he had slight mouth abrasions, that sort of stuff. Nothing wrong with him, sore neck. He'll be back riding next week. Unfortunately, Moroni fell into the pathway of Cutting Up Rough, who hit him flat out, and there was nowhere for them to go, nowhere for a horse or a rider to go. Sadly, that horse had to be humanely destroyed, which is horrible, and we all hate that. So our condolences to his connections. It's a terrible thing for them to go through. And Jonathan Parks, in that incident, broke his collarbone, Emily, so he won't ride for, he said to me today, about 6 weeks.
Okay.
So he's had a magic season.
Yeah, he has, yeah. And probably, if there's ever going to be an injury, the right time to be able to be back to kick off where he...
It's what I said to Bevan Sweeney. I said it could have been worse, could have been January.
Yeah, exactly.
Since then he's won so many big races. But yeah, it's still it's part of the job, and it's tough. Really feel for the connections of Cutting Up Rough. All of us want our horses to come home safe from the races.
Yeah.
And that didn't happen. It was just purely a racing incident. There was nothing anybody could do to help with that.
We had the jumps racing on the programme from Te Rapa as well, and Back to Master was pretty impressive, taking victory in one of those jumps races on the programme.
It's still Back to Master. Tamara's poking up along the inside. Now head to hook around him. Out wide ahead, two each way running on. Back to Master at the last. He ran it down, but he leads by 2. From in second spot, Tamara in each way. And then now Lucador, he's going to lead all the way, is the favourite. Back to Master. Back to Master beat Tamara. Third over was each way, and then came El Lucador, followed by...
A faultless jumping performance by Back to Master, who really showed his quality, and Michael Roustaby rides a lot of track work for the Tiakau team, so great to see him rewarded. Thought an eye-catching run by Tamara, and also Jockey of Each Way lost his stick in the closing stages. They're making up a lot of ground, so all of those horses I think to note down as black bookers.
I think it's an interesting prelude to the Waikato hurdles, because it could be an incredibly different race in 2 weeks' time if the track's wet. We all know once it's wet, it's a whole new ball game. On top of the ground, Back to Master's going to be awfully hard to beat because he's just quicker than those horses. But if it rains in the next 2 weeks, things could change. That was impressive, and I thought, wow, this is a pretty big win. But the steeplechase, what came up next, this was only a small fielding, but poetry in motion to watch them tangle. This is a remarkable display. And look, I almost think it doesn't matter too much what happens in the next 2 weeks. There's going to be vastly more and potentially better horses in the Waikato steeples, but gee, it's going to be hard to beat this boy.
Yeah, it was a really impressive performance, wasn't it? And very like back to Master, just a faultless jumping performance, which resulted in him pretty much blitzing the rest of the field. And Kevin Myers had a Quinella, I think, in the first race, and then he backed it up with Zentangle taking out the steeplechase. So a really good day for them with their jumpers.
But I would presume he's going to the Waikato Steeples. If he does, there's going to be a lot more serious horses. Horses like It's a Wonder are going to be in there. So it could be a really good free goers race. But before I get too carried away with the results, as in heading forward as form guides, I don't think most of our winter jumps races are going to be run on tracks quite that
dead
good.
fives, yeah.
Exactly. And it was spectacular to watch, though. Like it was. You sort of forget about jumps racing when you're in that Karaka million time of your life, and then when it comes back, you're like, wow.
So exciting,
this is really cool.
Yeah.
And we are going to look into jumps racing and the future of jumps racing on this show once we get through the Doomben Carnival and Melody Bell, because it's really important, and I think some really invested people have a lot to say. So you will get that before we finish up our season in mid-June.
Looking forward to that. There was also some pretty good action coming in from Riccarton, and we're joined on the phone by Fraser Aurette. But we'll have a little look at Unusual Countess first, who was the first of 2 stakes winners for the Fraser Aurette team.
Unusual Countess got to Lucy Bell. Getting through now, Art de Triomphe, then Fireglow and Mozzarella. Unusual Countess leads by 2, leads by 3, Art de Triomphe, then Fireglow. McKenzie Lad and Mozzarella running on. Unusual Countess, 2 clear at the 100. Art de Triomphe trying to rally. McKenzie Lad wider out. It's Unusual Countess just in front, and she got there. Unusual Countess beat home McKenzie Lad. Third in Fireglow.
Unusual Countess made it a pretty good day for her side, getting success at a debut performance. And as I mentioned, Fraser Aurette joins us on the phone. And Fraser, congratulations. Must be a pinch yourself kind of day to have got those 2 stakes wins on the programme.
It certainly was, Emily. You know, you dare to dream that all the plans can sort of come together, and yes, no, it was certainly a great thrill.
A really bold move by yourself at a debut performance, to have taken this horse down to Riccarton. You must have been pretty confident with her nature and her temperament to be able to handle that.
Look, that's really the key, Emily. You know, she's always been a really level-headed sort of filly and a no-fuss sort of filly. But, look, it wasn't a decision that we made lightly. Obviously, we had a very healthy opinion of her. But, as you say, it was a very big ask of a young horse like that. But, you know, sort of even going back to the stallion, he raced in 4 countries over a number of years and that sort of thing. And it seems like he's putting that temperament into a stock, which is a massive assist.
It was a massive day, a family day really for you, Fraser, wasn't it? Because your parents heavily involved in these 2 horses and this sire, Unusual Suspect. Tell me a little bit about the story behind that.
Yeah, so it seemed a bit of a strange time in Dad's career to be sort of chasing another stallion, but they had a fair bit of success with Metro en Jeu. He left plenty of sort of winners all over the place, really, and he sort of died quite suddenly, and this one sort of came available. So look, it's I take my hat off to any stud master. It's a very tough caper to venture into, and not bad for a stakes winner to pop up in your first runner in New Zealand.
Fraser, congratulations to you and the family on what unveiled there on Saturday. Can you tell us a bit more about the stallion, for example? How many mares did he serve last year? You might have a guess, I'm not sure. And what sort of fee are we talking for next season?
Yes, that's right. Well, look, he's it is a boutique operation that they sort of run. He's actually left about 9 or 10 individual winners in Australia from sort of a few crops of only 20 or 30 mares. I'm not 100% sure exactly how many he's sort of served, but as I say, he was a very durable type of horse. He won a Group 1 over 2400, but he was actually a Group winner as a 2-year-old as well. So he raced sound over a number of years, which is sort of testament to his attitude, I guess.
Fraser, Emily mentioned, of course, 2 stakes wins for the family on Saturday. Let's roll forward to the other one. Obviously, a horse who's a bit more experienced, so still not as hard to travel for a horse like this. Where do you see the end goal for a horse like Streak of Power? Because you can go to Canterbury and win these races, but what happens now?
Yes, so that's a really good question, Mick. I mean, look, I think it's the third or fourth time he's run around the 1:21 mark for 1,400 metres, which this campaign, which, you know, it's certainly a pretty slick time that he's done consistently, you know. So although he is 4, he's a very weak sort of style of horse, and I think that there is definitely sort of some maturity to come. So, look, if he can strengthen up a bit in this holiday, he's actually due home in about 30 minutes, and he'll go straight out to the paddock, you know, tomorrow for a well-deserved break. But if he can strengthen up and improve a bit, you know, look, it's sort of exciting to think of where he might end up.
Fraser, you got the last 2 at Hastings last week on Saturday. You picked up another one yesterday. Stable seems to be in form. Do you have a few horses who are those autumnal sort of horses who like to get their toe into the ground? Or at Riccarton, it seemed like it was quite a good track. So are they just coming up at the right time? Is the drop-off in class helping you? What's the reason for how things are going?
Look, I dare not question what's happening, really, Mick, as long as they keep doing what they're doing at the moment. But, no, look, I must say we don't have a lot that'll sort of go through the winter. So I guess it's really about getting them out there while the tracks are still quite reasonable and sort of make the most of the opportunities at hand.
Fraser, there's no such thing as a free lunch here on Weigh In. So before we let you go, can you tip our viewers a winner? What's the next one to come out of the team? Because your strike rate is almost the best in the country, so I think you're the man to ask.
Well, look, Madden Singh will be watching this in his house just over the road there, Mick, but he's on a horse called Mogador on Thursday, which I really do like. He's a lightly tried horse with a lot of ability, so he heads to Wanganui next Thursday, but no pressure, Madden.
Well done, Fraser. Michael, putting you on the spot. Sorry about that, but well done for Saturday to you and the whole family. A joint effort and something you must be very proud of.
Yes, absolutely. No, thank you very much, Emily.
We can move on now on Weigh In and get into the trainer and jockeys premierships, an update on those, and some pretty important news with those jockey injuries, Michael, especially around that Apprentice Jockeys Challenge.
Yeah, not much changing at the top. So we mentioned obviously earlier about a couple of the injuries out of Tarapa. Elisa Allpress had to go to hospital yesterday. Spoke to her husband Carl. She's fine. So she had tests and was allowed out of hospital. Did not stay the night. So she'll be back riding this week. So she's obviously third equal in the premiership. Not so good for Cozzy. Cozzy answered the phone yesterday and was in the ambulance, which is not where you like to go at the races. He also has a broken collarbone. So Jonathan Parks one day, Cozzy Asano fell on the last, those 2 events.
4 jockeys across 2 days.
It was amazing,
really,
wasn't it? And 2 broken collarbones. Now, obviously, Cozzy, looking at this, was in a battle with Hazel for leading apprentice. You would suggest Hazel now has an enormous advantage in that battle. She's 3 behind Cozzy, but Cozzy is likely to be out for 4 to 6 weeks if his collarbones are about the same density as Jonathan Parks's.
Yeah, right. And Trainers Premiership update there. A quick overview. Jamie Richards on 155 wins ahead of Stephen Marsh, the Pitmans, and of course the Baker Forsman team picking up a win. And the Pitmans announcing today that Enzo's lad has been retired. Horse who took them to Hong Kong, a horse who's very important to Michael's life because he went to Royal Ascot at a time where he had been diagnosed with cancer. And it gave Michael a real boost in that fight and a life-changing experience to go to Ascot and experience that for Michael. So to Michael and Matthew, great job with the horse. To the connections, I met some of them at Ascot. They loved every minute of it. And
it was the absolute epitome of a horse going somewhere it had almost no chance of winning and nobody caring that it had no chance of winning.
No, that's awesome. Someone else who also achieved some pretty big things over the weekend was Lisa Latter, who got her 1,000th winner, and that was with Platinum Star.
Bonita over on the outside and Grace Donors get in right up on the inside, and later's Platinum Star. Dawn County's the leader. Chica Bonita and Platinum Star are starting to flash. They grab him, they hit it. Platinum Star, and that's 1,000 for Lisa Latter. Congratulations, has got there.
Today's Weigh-In is brought to you by our stable of sponsors.
across the Tasman for our next segment on weigh-in, and Melody Bell took her place in the AD Hollandale Stakes, and we can have a little look at her effort. It was taken out by Zaki.
350, Tiptronic, Shared Ambition, Zaki on the outside, Toffee Tongue's back nearer the inside there. Next one, 50 Stars, and further back in the field, then Avilius down the outside, but Zaki's shot clear here from Shared Ambition. 50 Stars the next one, but it's all Zaki. One-way traffic, heavily backed, and Zaki bolts in the Hollandale. Zaki's won from 50 Stars and Shared Ambition. Then Avilius and Humidor.
Just around the winner, a relatively impressive performance by the winner, who cruised down to an easy victory, but for Kiwi eyes, Michael, it was all about Melody Bell. She just got squeezed out of a little gap there late, and from that wide draw, having to sort of settle 3 wide with a bit of cover. I feel that there's improvement in her heading towards the key race.
I think Jamie thought that before the race too. He thought she's going to improve. She's only got one more start to go, and it really is almost a farewell tour, so you can go get your picture taken and have a wave on the way to the sale where she's going to be sold. On that, she can't win the Doomben Cup, but I think Jamie's pretty realistic about that, but he does expect her to improve. He is hoping for a better draw. The Doomben Cups
Can't get much worse than 17 or 17,
no, and
surely.
Even had she been drawn well there, she wouldn't have beaten the winner. The winner's a very good horse. He actually raced at a really high level in England. He raced against Ben Battle and was placed behind those sort of horses, and we know now, because of Dave, how good those horses are. We know how good they are. So the first 4 home in that race were either former English or Irish gallopers, and it's done something to New Zealand racing, which we probably didn't see coming, because Tiptronic was 8th and To Illicit was back in the field. Both didn't enjoy the wet. It used to be when we went to Australia for these carnivals, if the track was wet, we had the big advantage, because we, Kiwis, handled the wet tracks usually better than the Australians. But that gap's also now being filled by English and Irish horses who love it when they come over here for wet tracks like a Dave, like Zaki. So that big advantage we used to get from sending those raw-boned, tough New Zealand stayers to Australia because their softer horses couldn't handle the hard grounds heavily, has disappeared, because that 2,000 to 2,000 or 3,200 metre gap in Australian racing is now filled by all English and all French, Irish horses. So all of a sudden,
it's Racing Victoria. There might not be too many coming up with the changes they've made. I still think we punch well above our weight, and
we do
think
but
that
we lost one of our big weapons, is because we used to have those hardy wet track stayers. Now they've imported about a couple of hundred of them.
I think also when you think of a Hollandale, you think of the Brisbane Carnival, you think of lesser quality. It's a happy hunting ground for some of our, New Zealand horses. But that was a really high quality race. There was a really good horses in that race, which
it felt like a mini Australian Cup, didn't it? It was that sort of race. Just on the carnival up there. Quick Thinker trials tomorrow at Rosehill in Sydney. They'll decide after that trial whether he goes up for the Brisbane Cup. Joy Alone is no longer going.
Yeah.
So Joy Alone is
That's a shame,
she's going to go to the paddock. And the horse of Andrews and Murray's, whose name I can never pronounce.
Daquan Sweet Jr.
Yeah, that's him. He's also trialling this week in Sydney, and he won't actually get into the 3-year-old race they wanted to go this week, because here's a brutal story. He's won 2 races and placed in a Group 3, and he's won 19,000 in stakes, which is another reason why these changes we have hopefully happening here in the north can't happen quick enough. So we can't even, you can win 2 races in New Zealand and be placed in a stakes race and not even get into a race in Brisbane because our stakes money is so low. So that's pretty confronting information, and it's information which would suggest to us why some of these changes being spoken about need to be made.
We can't dwell on that because we had Gosford Cup success in the form of former Kiwi, Polly Gray. She was trained by Kylie Fawcett here in New Zealand, and she's really been putting together a good record in Australia, taking out the Epona Stakes earlier on in this campaign and then adding a Gosford Cup to the record. She relishes the soft track conditions, Michael, and she has been doing a fantastic job over there with Chris Waller.
Well, already has won in town a few times for Chris. You know, this is again almost a farewell tour for her. I actually thought she was going through the chairman's sale, so she was entered for one of the Broomere sales. I thought it was the chairman's, but maybe she's not. Maybe she's heading to the one on the Gold Coast. I don't know the answer to that, but I would suggest this is her last campaign. So I either read that or she pulled out of one or the other.
Still the Magic Millions sale to go.
Yeah, exactly. So she could well be heading there. So look, she's done a super job over there. I remember it being a good horse in New Zealand, but I'm not sure I remember being quite that good.
Time, maturity, yeah, maybe has helped.
And can
him.
handle wet tracks.
Which is a big plus, as we spoke of. Moving on next to a Derby King, I think it's fair to call him that. This was his third Derby. Explosive Jack was exactly that in the South Australian Derby. He's got a Tasmanian Derby to his record, an Australian Derby, now a South Australian Derby. And Michael, could he add a Queensland Derby to that? Most importantly, a Kiwi bred by Jackalberry, and a wonderful result for Luigi Mulo, who of course lost Jackalberry, but has this wonderful connection through the Explosive family.
And first and second sold at Karaka. There's Andrew Seabrook, who's the boss there at New Zealand Bloodstock, saying, well, you know, we've bred all these Derby winners. And it just reiterates to people that if you want to buy a Derby winner, because we go back to the European purchasing thing, you can't buy a Derby winner from Europe.
No.
It's almost impossible, almost. So this is where you want to come if you want Oaks winners and Derby winners, as Andrew points out there. Look, it's pretty hard to say any of the horses who finished behind him would beat him home if he goes to a Queensland Derby.
God, I love him. I love the way he gets over the ground and just
You've got a
gets
bit of a
down
horse
to his
crush,
work.
haven't you?
I have. I just think
Well,
he's
you
great.
think
Can't
he's a
wait to
good-
see him at 4.
You think he's a good staying type?
Just
proper one?
lovely. Just eats up the ground. Just looks like he'd run at that speed all day. 3 laps, he'd still go at that speed. That's the kind of horse that he... Look, Kieran Maher and David Eustace do a fabulous job as well. And they've had great success with Kiwi breds over the years.
Yeah, well, look, they're also great trainers of virtually everything now. They're one of the few training operations in Australasia that trains 2-year-olds, Melbourne Cup horses and steeplechasers.
Yeah.
They had horses racing at Warrnambool last week over the fences, so he must be a hell of a horseman, Kieran Maher. He's got a great eye. I saw him the other day when another horse won the Grand Annual at Warrnambool. He's the first person hugging the trainer.
I saw that too,
and
yeah.
it's just a nice touch, because he obviously used to be a jumps jockey, so he knows how hard it is in those battles. But I get the feeling, I don't know Kieran, but I get the feeling that in 10 years' time, or 5 years' time even, his body of work will be enormous, and he will be a Hall of Famer.
Yeah, no, exactly right. Cox Plate, of course, this season as well. Also, just to mention to Luigi Mulo, who had Signora Nera, who was second in that listed Gold Coast bracelet as well. Well done to him for that. A wonderful weekend. Waikato Stud were achieving massive things as well. We picked up this tweet from the weekend, currently sitting #1 for Waikato Stud graduates on the Black Type Vendor Premiership on Australia, worked out on points earned by Australian racehorses from Sale graduates in Australia and New Zealand. A wonderful, wonderful achievement for them, ahead of some very, very big names there when you see Arrowfield Stud, Wooden Stud, and something we should be very proud of.
Enormously so. This is a points-based program put together by one of the websites involved in racing, but it's independent, and they've said, look, if you buy a horse at Waikato, it's got probably at least as good a chance, if not a better chance, of getting black type than any horse or any other stud in Australasia. And if you compare the average price a horse from Waikato would be sold for, because a lot of them go for Karaka, some for Australia, compared to, say, the average price some of the other studs on there, because they're selling at
Getting
Sydney
more
Place.
bang for your buck, aren't you?
Well, you're probably paying halves,
Yeah.
to be honest. So I know you're going to go talk
Getting
to...
that wonderful New Zealand quality.
I know you're going to go talk to Mark about a couple of weeks' time before we finish up for the season. So they've got so much to be proud of, because even on regular Wednesdays and Saturdays, they have those Waikato Stud colours turning up at all sorts of race meetings.
Yeah, exactly. We can have a little look at the Kentucky Derby, Michael. I just wanted to mention that whilst we're on international news. A positive swab for the winner, Medina Spirit. Yeah, really disappointing.
Look, it's massive news. Now, the drug, which is supposedly in the system of Medina Spirit, who's trained by Bob Baffert, who has had a history of these problems in the past. Most of them he has not been suspended for. So let's get that out of the way. And we're not saying this is true because the second sample hasn't been tested. But he's come out and put his name out there and he said, this is my situation, what's happening. It's a drug which has withholding time, and basically the amount in the horse's system allegedly is twice the recommended amount or twice the allowed amount. So you can see how a withholding incident would happen. But here's where things get complicated. Bob Baffert has come out and said, well, we don't use that on our horses. Well, that gets really complicated. Now, the Kentucky Derby is massive, bigger than we can understand, and it's covered by NBC, and it's covered in the New York Times and those places, and these people are going to gravitate to that at a time when racing doesn't need any bad news. We're not saying anybody's guilty. We don't know. Of course, we have no idea. But it's not a good situation, and it's really hard to prove it wasn't in the horse's system, whereas saying we stuffed up the dosage and the vet got it wrong, maybe you can prove that because there's a withholding time. But saying it wasn't in the horse's system is incredibly hard to prove in any court of law. It's a messy, messy situation. We obviously don't know what happens to it, but it was a fairy tale story now, which may not have the fairy tale ending.
Yeah, exactly right. We caught up with Mark Devasich from Cambridge Stud a couple of weeks ago to find out a little bit more about him and what he looks for in a weanling. Mark, how long have you been working here in your role as General Manager at Cambridge Stud?
Just on 10 months, so yes, it's a bit of a transition for me.
Transition from what? What were you up to before?
So previously I was running my adjustment business and sale business with my wife Sarah at Henley Park. So yeah, we've been operating for about 12 years now.
Wow.
So yeah, from there I've come to Cambridge Stud, which has been a wonderful experience so far, working with some great people and lovely bloodstock, and yeah, and just a fantastic environment to work in.
What does your role involve here?
I basically just oversee everything, or the whole operation, and just coordinate with all the managers and yeah, just liaise on with them on a day-to-day basis and just organise stuff with them.
So you've driven me down the farm here. What are we looking at today?
So we'll be looking at some weanlings. We've got a nice, there's an embellished colt in there I'll show you. So the weanlings have been, they've been motherless for about 2 to 3 weeks. Yeah, so now they're little teenagers, so we'll, they're going to grow up on their own, and then obviously be ready for the yearling sales.
Cool, should we have a look?
Course. Yeah, no. So what happens here at Cambridge Stud is during the season, from about 30 days of age, we employ some couple of girls that come in and handle these foals. So they do 2 courses with them, so over a period of a couple of weeks in those 2 stages, and so they get fully handled, and so they're ready to be weaned come say March. So we'll feed those mares and foals for a month beforehand, and then they'll go through that weaning process.
Yep.
Yes, the mums will come out in pairs or 3s or whatever until there's only one left, and that we'll leave a nanny mare in until for at least 3 to 4 weeks. Just let them settle down and get used to this environment of being weaned, and yeah, and without their mothers, and just having a nanny mare in there just gives them that little bit more, security. So we have here, we have the Savabeel colt out of Cover Charge. He's out of an American mare that's owned by Max Whitby. The other one here is a Tarzino colt out of Conniving. We just sold the half brother at Karaka for 230,000, and the other one is a Savabeel filly out of Joyous Thunder. That's another one of Max Whitby's foals. And last but not least, we have the embellished colt out of Grand Wish. She's a smart missile mare. Actually, Scott Calder purchased her from Melbourne. So a little pressure on there, but he got a good result. He's ended up with she's a lovely mare and left a very nice foal by Embellish. We're really happy with him actually. He's a forward colt, good muscle and well marked, and attractive type. No, we're really happy with him.
Mark, it looks like the main developments at Cambridge Stud are done, but there's still lots of really exciting things happening, aren't there?
Oh, certainly, Emily. Obviously, you can see in the backdrop here we've placed a big emphasis on improving our waterways, so and protecting them. So that means we're trying to look after the banks and make it more eco-friendly for the future. So I think that's a big plus for Cambridge. That they've really put, as I said, made that big concerted effort on trying to improve all those waterways, and I think also it gives you a bit of, aesthetically it looks nicer too, and I think really pleased with how it's all coming together. It's a lot of work, and obviously a big team put a lot of work into looking after these waterways, and I think as I said, in the future it's gonna be a big bonus for everyone, I think. And
brought to you by our stable of sponsors.
You're back with us on Weigh In. If you enjoyed that feature piece with Mark Devisic, don't forget that the Weanling Sales are on this week, 14th of May. Just one day extravaganza starting at 11 a.m. All the details available online, nzb.co.nz. Also, some information around the Hall of Fame dinner. If you missed out on that and want to view the coverage, you can see that tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. on Trackside 1 to catch up with all the highlights from that Hall of Fame dinner. Of course, where we saw James McDonald, Sir Peter Vella inducted amongst a host of wonderful other racing participants. We promised you Dean McKenzie on the show for the last part, and he joins us now. And Dean, wonderful to see Sir Peter inducted into the Hall of Fame, a current board member.
Yeah, it was. Look, he's done an enormous amount for New Zealand racing in many, many roles and helped a lot of us. I think there was quite a few in the room that he'd helped in some way at some point over the years, so I think we all got a big kick out of it, probably more than he did, so no, bloody good to see.
You've just moved into your new role as the Chief Transition Officer. Tell me about that and what that involves.
Look, in a lot of ways it's just another change in title. We're still on the same journey. We're focused on trying to make the TAB the strongest, most successful, commercially orientated organisation it can be. So it's a little bit of BAU, if you like, but just a more refined role, more management than governance, and where the other two roles have kind of been a little bit of both without boring you with a whole lot of detail. So no, the focus is the same.
What about what stage is that appointment process at with the new the TAB board?
Yeah, the board process is. The board process is run by the Department of Internal Affairs, so that's probably the first thing to make sure that everyone understands. So the department liaises with the selection panel that the minister set up to conduct the process. Or the selection of the candidates. So it's not something that we're involved with at the TAB. So we're pretty much focused on doing what we're doing and trying to, as I say, bank some money and get on and get the industry on the right financial footing. So we're not involved in that process at all. But hopefully it's best to do these things in a robust fashion, and hopefully that can be sorted out in the near future.
Dean, thank you for joining us. There's so many people who watch the show who want to know where certain things are at with TAB New Zealand, and it's hard, it's such a moving space. One of them is code payout, and I believe today that there has been an additional payout for this season, so extra monies that will go to the 3 codes inside the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, so pretty much, we've been balancing, a whole lot of factors, which I'm sure everyone are well aware of, so we probably don't need to go into too much detail in that regard. But what's happened is, as we've progressed through the year, the combination of some, pretty solid trading results, which, we now publish monthly. So since last August, we've tried to be more transparent and make sure that the industry knows how well the most significant asset is performing. So every month we've been publishing those. They're on our website if anyone ever wants to go and have a look at them. They're also emailed out to a large database as well. But that's kind of the combination of that and some good solid months of trading, and the fact that of course that we've stripped quite a bit of cost out of the business through the impact of COVID and the like, and over the last 12 months, you put those two things together, and it would be fair to say we financially we have had one of the better years, which is a good thing. But of course we're all balancing a whole lot of different things. As you've already alluded to, it's the situation is pretty fluid out there economically. Things can change pretty quickly, as we know. We've had some aspects of the business have been impacted even regardless with through the good trading months, and the most obvious part of that is the gaming part of it, where when you close down Auckland, 40% of our retail outlets are based in Auckland, and then gaming's shut and they sell nothing. So you've got to be pretty careful before you start making any heavy commitments. And I think I said to you last time we spoke at Christmas time that it's just a little bit more patience, and we'll get one month of good trading after another and get some runs on the board, so to speak, and get us heading in the right direction.
Some of those runs on the board, so that payment of $6.2 million, I believe it is now an immediate payment to come forward. What about by the time we get to the end of the season? What are the projections for the returns to the codes because of race usage, field usage, obviously the repeal of the betting levy from the government, so those things are now coming more into play. Turnovers have been very high. The figure last year, I believe, was $151 million, but that was because it had to also be partially topped up by the government money. How much money do you see being returned to the industry for next season?
Yeah, look, probably the simplest way of putting it is, you know, we've gone through a process of, again, trying to assess each month. And every month at this time of the calendar, so to speak, particularly with, you know, we're in really unique trading circumstances at the moment. I think everyone would agree with that. None of us have been through a pandemic before. You know, what's around the corner, no one is really 100% sure of. So, you know, you've got to be pretty careful and tread pretty carefully as you go. In saying all of that, you know, we've given the codes an indication that should there be no, you know, with a few conditions, because I mean, that's the reality of what we're dealing with at the moment is, you know, should there be no future you know, COVID impacts, you know, lockdowns, that type of thing, significant disruptions to our supply chain like we had, you know, with sports stopping and the like, and domestic racing, you know, shutting down, those types of things. You know, we're thinking that there's in the vicinity of maybe $15 to $20 million more for next season. So that's from the 1st of August, that's potentially available. So that's, you know, again, I use the word, that's an indicative amount that we've highlighted to them. So what we're working on at the moment is, again, we gave them that indication probably 2 or 3 weeks ago based on trading to the end of March. You know, we've had another good April where, you know, a week or so, 10 days into May, trading is still strong at the moment. So, you know, we'll look to confirm that number up. You know, they've got to go and manage their business. We're pretty conscious of that. So we wanted to give them as early indication as possible as to how trading was going. And we'll look to firm that up in the next 6 weeks and give them a final confirmed number towards the end of June. So that's the time frame around that.
The betting turnover has been enormous worldwide because more people are stuck at home. So it was obviously, racing was one of the sports that continued when others did not. Do you have any modelling or even any opinion, as someone who's very active in this space, whether betting turnover will start to decline or return to normal levels once the world becomes less affected by COVID?
Yeah, look, I think I've said here before, Nostradamus would struggle at the moment to know what's around the corner. I think it would be fair to say that COVID is with us for some time. So I think some of those impacts that we've had, disruptions to travel, people's discretionary spending has transferred from some sectors to others. And I think you're right, the at-home entertainment sector, Netflix, even into Zoom, if you like, that type of thing, there's been benefits for that. And we're one of those categories that have had some assistance from that. It's not the only one. I think we've got better at managing, some aspects of our business over the last 12 months in the revenue side of the equation. So there are other things that mix into that. But you're right, there is that residual COVID bounce, if you like, that is out there. Now, how long that will go for, look, no one knows. I think what I can say to the industry is, our recovery is underwritten by a different structure. So there's circa $20 million in operating costs that aren't in the business now that were there 2 years ago. So that revenue can twist and turn and maybe go up a couple of points or drop. It's still been run, from a far more efficient economic model. So, we should be somewhat more insulated from some of those impacts that I referred to earlier than we were, 18 months or so, when COVID hit.
Let's get down to some of the heavy hitting because it's been a really busy space and both you and I have had to operate it in a lot and had a lot of conversations. 3 years ago in August, there was a massive suggestion the TAB would be outsourced. The racing licence was on the table in some people's minds at $100 million for 25 years. In your opinion, seeing what is happening in Australia at the moment, our primary partner was Tabcorp. Tabcorp are now under...
Tabcorp are still our primary partner.
And they are under attack by private equity firms from overseas in the vicinity of $4 billion. We do not know who will hold those licences in 2, 3, 5 years' time. Did we dodge a bullet by not getting into an outsourcing agreement where Tabcorp would have taken over the New Zealand racing licence, now knowing that we wouldn't know who we were beholden to?
Look, you know, I wasn't involved with the organisation 3 years ago when John Massara originally, you know, made that recommendation around outsourcing. That question has been thrown around.
What's your opinion?
With Tabcorp in lights at the moment around that space, what I would say is it highlights how important the decision is around the New Zealand TAB, because you can only do something like that once, right? Or once in our lifetime. It's, you know, they're talking 25-year licence. So it's probably reflective of how much and how quickly things can change. So what you think is a pretty easy equation to work out, 1 + 1, all of a sudden it doesn't equal 2 because of things completely outside your control and jurisdiction. Now, the current movement around the Australasian gambling environment or wagering environment is being driven by what's going on in the US. That's what's driving it, is the legalisation of sports betting in the US.
So they grow bigger, private equity wants more piece of the pie. They also see Australia as piece of the pie, so they want to buy some of that.
Well, the per capita spend in Australia from gambling is significantly more than, I think, in virtually every metric. You know, you'll find that the Australian continent or country, if you like, a better term, is number one. So clearly, there's some attraction there for those types of firms. I mean, there has been quite a bit of, a lot of these firms have aggregated over recent times anyway. You know, with Flutter and the likes, and Entain, who are involved in some of those discussions that you referred to. So, you know, that. I think the only thing you'll find is that the change will continue.
I want to talk and ask you some questions for the people who are at home watching this, because I believe they're your only customers, and I believe they're the most important customers watching this show, and that's people who bet. A couple of things about betting. Mentions that jet bet operators were going to be phased out of racetracks apart from major carnivals and replaced by machines. We haven't seen that happen. Has there been a backtracking on that policy at this stage to phase out jet bet operators on track?
Look, and a simple answer is no. I think what the industry's, if we want to continue to spend the money we've got the same way we have for the last 20 years, we'll end up in the same space. So what we've got to do, whether we like it or not, we've got to look for efficiencies that we need to transfer our customer to lower cost mechanisms of how we can sell bets.
Betting on your phone or machines.
That's right. Okay. They cost us less. The digital bet is a matter of cents.
Isn't customer service crucial? Isn't it a fact that if we have that on some days, some people are going to say, well, this is too tough, I'll buy a bottle of wine instead? Because
no, there's got to be a balance. I mean, that's a valid point. And I think even back when COVID hit and we were having to make some really, really hard decisions for the industry to ensure it survived, that one around on-course betting was based around the likelihood that we were going to be running at 10 tracks and Wednesdays and Saturdays and that type of thing. Now, the TAB team, the operational team at the TAB, have effectively carried that that smaller infrastructure base, if you like, and still managed to handle the same calendar because of what's happened with COVID, right? So, it's an incredible achievement to operationally, deliver that kind of platform. So,
does that extrapolate out to retail outlets? Because there's a retail outlet in Newmarket. It was our signature one. It closed, and I know there's still plenty that are open. But is it just going to be better for the industry to have less retail outlets and more people on their phones?
Look, retail's a pressure point, and you only need to pick up the newspaper, if you like, or read stories about Australia and other jurisdictions that have retail networks. It's definitely a pressure point. I think there's only been 4 outlets that have closed post-COVID. The ones that are closely aligned to the gaming side of the business add an extraordinary amount of value to the industry and the network. So I can't see there being a drastic change in the retail footprint in the near future. Whether that's into the medium term is another question. I think what you'll find is we need to get better again about how we service our customer in the retail space, and if we can do that as well on a cost base, a more efficient, customer-friendly cost base. It's like getting on an aeroplane these days. You either do it through an app or a kiosk. And there's an assistant there to help you if you're having difficulties. Now, we've got to go down that. We've got to be able to supply better information in a more convenient fashion at a lower cost for our agents, all those types of things. So retail will change, but I don't think you'll see it's a competitive advantage that we've got in this space. We don't, despite the Act saying that, we have a monopoly licence in New Zealand, we all know that the TAB doesn't. We're in a very competitive space. 25% of our bets effectively come through the retail network, so we need to ensure that we're maximising that to our best ability.
On that, let's talk about the people who pay for this building and pay a lot of people's wages, the punters.
Yep.
You've been on an ad, and I fully understand the ad saying we should bet in New Zealand, it's better for New Zealand racing. That is very factual, there's no doubt about that. But who at board level, or who at your level, or in the team here, advocates for the punters? Who says, for example, we need a bit less percentage in these markets, because if we're going to have close to a monopoly, or we're asking potentially for a monopoly, we're going to try and not win as much off you guys, like a casino does, because you'll keep coming back, or even more so, minimum bet laws. Racing Victoria come out this week, minimum bet laws come and play. If you open a market Wednesday morning, you have to let Emily Bossum win $2,000 on that market. We still don't have that. And if we're asking people to come join us and show us the love to New Zealand racing, don't we owe them that?
Yeah, look, the minimum bet rule is something we're looking really closely at the moment. I think you'll see some movement in that space soon.
When?
Well, soon. I mean, it's not when you're talking about a minimum bet. Are you talking about domestic racing, domestic and international? You're talking about
New Zealand
Australia. New Zealand greyhounds, New Zealand harness.
I think the person who has a bet on New Zealand racing, I think any of those three codes, if they have a bet on New Zealand racing, they have an obligation, if we're going to show respect and love to the New Zealand TAB, to say we'll let you win at least something, rather than win $30 or $40, because I think that's an insult to our customers, and I think we both know that. I know it's not an easy thing to put in play, but I think we can't ask people for their support if we're not going to show them some reciprocation.
Yeah, look, I think we're very conscious we're in a competitive space. We have to present, a product and an offering that absolutely sits there at world class. And I think, some of the innovations that we've come up with lately, fixed odds exotics, it's a world-leading product. The top 2 and top 4 that have just come in, we're now paying dead heat for final field win bets. So they're all things that have happened in the last 3 or 4
weeks. And the website's a lot better.
3 or 4 weeks. So the
website's very good.
Website's performing well. So look, we're very conscious we're in a competitive space. Don't get me wrong. I think the minimum bet thing is in reality a more perception thing than that. And I'll give you an example. On Saturday at Karaka, we took 38,000 individual final field win bets. There was one bet that was restricted at point of that went to the trader, and there was a handful that were restricted without going to the trader. So what I'm saying is, yes, we need to address it because that's what our competitors have done. But what is also important is our duty is to try and maximise our profit. So there's a difference between taking a pari-mutuel bet, as you well know, where there's a standard deduction and you're winning off another customer. So when you win in a pari-mutuel bet, you win off someone else.
You and I could talk about this all day.
I know, we've got to go.
Apologies, we're getting talked about it
Getting in trouble, okay.
We do appreciate you coming on board and giving us those updates. It's great. And mate, great news for the TAB, huge results and more money being returned to the industry. So thank you for all the work that goes into that.
And we can come back to this in the coming weeks.
I look forward to it. Yeah.
Thank you very much for your time, Dean, and a big thank you to everybody. We'll be back next week, same time on Weigh In.
Thank you, mate.
I didn't realise we were so close.
Bye.